Well, let's call to order the special meeting of the MAPS 3 Citizens Advisory Board of August 26, 2010. And we'd like the record to show that all the members of the board are present. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. First item on our agenda is a consideration of the minutes of the July the 22nd, 2010 meeting. You've been furnished with copies of those. Are there additions or corrections? Additions or corrections? Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Motion has been made and seconded that we approve the minutes of the July 22nd meeting. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. Item 3 on the agenda is the election of a vice chairperson of the MAPS 3 Citizens Advisory Committee. And this is, you will recall that at our last meeting, we talked about the need for that, and the City Council will be considering an item about that at their next meeting. But we are today have this item on our agenda. The information I have about it is that the vice chair would be a rotating position, and that we would be voting today on someone who would serve a one-year term. We asked for interest of members of the committee, and we received a response from several of you, and we appreciate that very much. After considering the methodology for doing this, we had asked Amanda Carpenter if she would review, our legal counsel, if she would review the Robert's Rules of Order. And so here is the plan, subject to your approval. The plan is that we will ask for nominations from members of the board, and any member is eligible to be nominated. When those nominations close, we will have a roll call vote, and you will be asked to vote for the person that is nominated that you choose. If a person receives a majority on the first ballot, they will be selected as the vice chair. If no one receives a majority, then we will have a runoff. You know, we're one of the few states that does. So we'll have a runoff for that. So I now declare the floor open for the election of a vice chairperson of the MAPS 3 Citizens Advisory Board. Are there nominations?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'm Wayne William, Ward 7, and I nominate Ward 8, Rusty LaForge.
Rusty LaForge has been nominated. Larry?
I'd like to nominate Ward 3 Representative Kim Lowe.
Ward 3 Representative Ken Lowe has been nominated. Are there other nominations? Are there other nominations? Then I declare the nominations closed, and let's call the roll for the vote.
Would you please call your names? Oh, I call mine. I'm sorry.
This is tricky business for us. We're amateurs.
Susan Hooper.
Lucky me, I get to be first. So no campaign speeches or?
Well, certainly, if you'd like to hear from the candidates, we have a long agenda today, but we've got plenty of time. So if you'd like to hear from the candidates, would you like to do that, Susan?
How about just one or two statements reminding us about their maybe why they're on the board again, that type of thing.
Okay, Rusty, you were nominated first. An element of this that I have discussed with those who had indicated interest is, why don't you tell us your interest in being on the board, your interest in serving as vice chair, and the term for which you've been appointed?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely, from the beginning, it's taxpayer interest, thinking about making sure this is done as best it can be. I have a 3-year term, and the interest in being vice chair. Wayne asked if I was interested. He said he thought it'd be good. I'm somewhat familiar with Robert's Rules of Order. I think I could do a decent job of keeping it going smooth. So I'll keep it short.
Good morning. My name is Kim Lowe. Once again, I asked to be considered for the MAPS 3 Advisory Board as chairman of a 5-neighborhood coalition in the Northwest neighborhoods in Ward 3 and president of my own neighborhood association, as it became very eminent that a great portion of the public was very confused about MAPS 3 in my area. There were lots of questions, and it many of the meetings that I had attended, I found myself defending maps and talking about what a great thing it was for Oklahoma City. So that has been my constant interest, whether I'm on this board or not, as to watching MAPS 3 evolve. Secondly, because of being a chairman of a 5-neighborhood coalition, which I've done that for 4 years, neighborhood president for our neighborhood for 7 years, and serving on several boards, I felt very comfortable with running meetings in our chairman's absence, and am very fluent with Robert's Rules of Order. So, thank you.
Before we call the roll, I just want to remind you that it's going to be a 1-year term. There will be other members that will get a chance to serve if you want to, and of course all of us are either going to be a chair or vice chair of all the subcommittees. So this is the first of many opportunities to serve in a leadership role. Call the roll.
Susan Hooper.
I vote for Kimberly Lowe.
Okay. Michael Dover.
I think I voted for Rusty.
Kimberly Lowe. Zane Boatwright. Dee Morales. Michael Adams. Nathaniel Harding.
Rusty LaForge.
Wayne Williams.
Rusty LaForge.
Rusty LaForge.
Myself.
Larry McAtee. We have 6 votes for Mr. LaForge, 4 for Ms. Lowe. And
Is there a tie to break?
no, there isn't.
Well, congratulations, Rusty, on your selection. Kimberly, thank you for your interest in serving. We really appreciate everybody's interest in being a part of what we do. All right, we go to item 4. We have before us, and you have seen in your packet, a resolution authorizing the city staff to initiate the selection process for professional services to perform the site selection analysis for the MAPS 3 Convention Center. And I want to just remind you that the mayor and the council appointed our first subcommittee. Susan Hooper is the vice chair of that, and I'm chairing it. We had our first meeting last Friday. And at that, we had a spirited discussion of all the material that you see here. And so we bring forward this item for your consideration. We're going to ask Eric if he would explain it for us. Eric?
Be happy to. The item that you have in your packets today actually includes a strike-through of some of the changes that were made as a result of some of the comments received. You'll find those comments included the additional final sentence in the introduction. This proposal will not preclude the participation of the consultant selected for the site selection to also be on the design team or a part of a future project on the convention center. And so this sentence was put in here to clarify that position. The other thing that I'll bring to your attention is on pages 3 of 7 and 4 of 7 in the site selection criteria, we have included some additional language to also include the relationship to downtown and Bricktown as it relates to the study process of the convention center. It originally just said the city's urban planning initiatives, but those specifics were also included as requested by the subcommittee. We are open to any further suggestions at the meeting today. If you've had an opportunity to review this to make further changes before you choose to adopt this, it would be a recommendation of approval to forward this to City Council for its issue, and at that point, we will be removing the draft stamps off of the documents. We'll be formally incorporating those comments. And so that's a part of the process that went through the subcommittee last week. If I might, this RFP process is something that is a process established by the city. So it's not just for this MAPS 3 program. It's something that we utilize on other projects throughout. The process is such that we will be sending this out, and it will be open to all those that are interested in submitting a proposal. The proposal process will go through a selection which will include shortlisting and interviews. And I would anticipate that we would possibly be members of the subcommittee, this advisory board, and then other stakeholders, possibly city staff and others that will actually be part of that committee as we go through the formal process of selecting. Once a selection is made, contract negotiations will then come back before this board and council. We must seek authorization and negotiate a contract, so you will be updated whether you are actually participating or not to know which firm was selected. and then that final contract will then come back for approval. So you're going to see this multiple times. This isn't something that is a one item for today and then it's just going to happen. And I want you to have that assurance that there's several other stages yet before us. But the committee did hear this on Friday the 20th, and changes are incorporated, and I'm open to any further suggestions that you might have as we proceed forward.
I've got one question. Does the criteria address the possibility of archaeological discovery and the remediation of such if it was something was dug up?
You know, as a part of the site selection process, I don't think we're going to go into that depth unless there's something that's historically identified, say, through documents. I mean, there's going to be very limited studies when we talk about subsurface investigations and such, but we are anticipating some basic level environmental as a part of the package. So when we start looking at things that maybe previous oil wells, locations, previous uses of the site that might include gas stations and things like that, those items I anticipate will be taken into consideration, but things like that are usually not found until we actually get into the construction phase, unfortunately. Okay. And then just to reiterate, too, the site has not been selected, which is the whole reason for this process. And we need to go through a formal MAPS 3 process to initiate a consultant. There have been some studies, and you will find in your resource guide pretty much a lack of information in there in regard to the convention center. There's been some studies chaired by other agencies that have looked at it from a various planning perspective. But this one's going to take it into a more detailed analysis that's going to take into site access, expansion possibilities, and you can see the entire list of criteria again on pages 3 and 4. There's a comprehensive list there that we're asking this consultant to go through to pick or at least help prioritize and pick the best site for the new convention center.
One of the things, Zane, I'll just mention is that the criteria were discussed at some length in the subcommittee meeting, and I left there thinking that there might be things added or expanded on after the consultants are hired. This was just to give a checklist of things that we know about now. But we would expect when the consultants are hired, this might be modified, added to. They may have ideas that we haven't included here. So it would be a work in progress. Am I thinking about that right, Eric?
That's correct.
Susan, you were at the meeting, and Vice Chair, would you have any comments about that?
No, that's my understanding is, given our knowledge of what we're looking for right now with just the site selection, but as we get into the interviews, perhaps we will grow in what else we need to ask.
Rusty?
Go ahead. I just had one comment, and I guess one question. One comment was, first of all, I was quite pleased with the appointments that the mayor made to the subcommittee, and seems like we have a very diverse group, and all sides are going to be heard there, and I'm confident that the right site's going to be recommended. The second question I had, or the question I had, I guess, is what is the timing of this process? What do you anticipate to be, I guess, the steps and when those might occur and when a recommendation might be made?
Following the board's recommendation today, this would be placed on the September 14th council meeting, which would give staff then that authorization to proceed. We could initiate at that point. We typically leave proposals like this open for a 3 to 4 week period of advertisement as we go through and just make sure we give proper notice to those that might be interested. But then I would tell you that it could be a 90-day or more process as we go through the formal selection. And that will be giving opportunity to the committee members to do an adequate review, going through the shortlisting that I discussed, and then actually scheduling those interviews and making sure that we get everybody back involved. And so it's going to take several months. It's not a short process that we'll be going through, but it'll help us ensure we get the right consultant for the study.
How long do you think they would take to make the recommendation?
You know, we don't do studies like this, at least in this depth, frequently, but I would say it could take another 3 months, possibly 2 to 3 months, for them to do a full analysis of all available sites. And so I think we would be fortunate to probably see some early information at the beginning of next year. But again, as we start to initiate this process, we do want to get that started. But it could be early next year before we really have some real meaning to the study.
Rusty? Yeah, I want to say this, Rusty, before we start. Michael was nice enough to attend that subcommittee meeting, and I want to make this point with you and Amanda and Eric and make sure that we all understand it. But several of you asked about attending subcommittee meetings of which you're not a member, and the answer is you're welcome to come, but if we have a certain number, we are limited to the number of members of this committee. Can you or Amanda explain that?
And I'll start, and Amanda can fill in if we need to. One of the concerns that we have is if a quorum is met, there's obviously, it's not a problem, but there can be concerns generated if a quorum of this board is met at a non-meeting, so to speak, or a non-meeting of the board. And so we've got to make sure that if that happens, that we're not talking about business at those meetings. And so obviously, as we proceed with caution, we'd like to avoid that if possible, but if it occurs, Amanda and I will be at each of those meetings and we'll help advise as necessary. But again, it's more of a cautionary measure that we just want you to be aware of that occurrence and what the perception might be in case that were to come up.
Thank you. Well, we're all learning about this together, and I wanted to thank you for that. Amanda, did you want to add anything to that? Thank you. Rusty?
Yeah, I may have missed it. Eric, did you say the subcommittee does recommend it with these changes for our approval?
They do.
They did decide that, okay.
So, are there other comments or questions? Well, you have in front of you in your packet a resolution authorizing the city staff to initiate the selection process for professional services to perform site selection analysis for the MAPS 3 Convention Center. This would be a formal resolution coming from this group, from our board, that would go to the city council. What's your pleasure? Zane has made a motion, been seconded. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Are those opposed? It's adopted. Next item is item 4B. This is a resolution, discussion of a resolution establishing the boundaries of MAPS 3 Downtown Public Park. Very important. Eric?
Thank you. Included in the information that's in your packets, and I'm just going to kind of summarize some of the history on this. Obviously the MAPS 3 program does include the construction of a new downtown public park. We've provided just about as much information as we have today thus far in the resource guide that was handed out at the first meeting. I think each of us is also aware that there's an ongoing Court Ashore plan that the city's planning department initiative is seeking and proceeding on. But with that said, the City Council did approve on March 2nd, that would be prior to us actually engaging our projects formally, but on March 2nd, the Court Ashore Urban Renewal Plan, and they also approved the policies and procedures for residential and commercial acquisition within this relocation area. It just so happens that this park is in the Court Ashore area. It's 70 acres of nearly 700 of a future redevelopment plan. And so we are at a point where there's a lot of activity going on in this area, and it's necessary for us to proceed with certain site acquisition of the park. And so there's three things that are included in the item for your consideration today. The first is to confirm the boundaries of the park. You will notice that the Court Ashore plan, the Central Park Concept Plan, and also the Court Ashore Urban Renewal Plan all have maps of the park in those prospective documents, but there is some question, and this is an Exhibit A to your drawing, about the south boundary, which we have prescribed as Southeast 15th Street of the South Park. And so the park boundaries as proposed are in the Exhibit A that's included in your item, and this would formalize those boundaries for the Central Park. The second item that this resolution does is authorizes the expenditure of MAPS 3 funds for the acquisition of property within that park area. And so as we look at both of those are the two major actions. The priority is to acquire the North Park first. That would be the boundary that's located between the old Interstate 40 and the new Interstate 40. The South Park would be acquired after the North Park, but only upon voluntary property owner acquisitions or any time after 2014. And so those were some early agreements that the City Council had made for property owners in that area, that we would focus on the park, but that there would be a time frame established. And so in the resolution, you will see these terms prescribed: boundaries of the park, authorizing the expenditure of MAPS 3 funds for the acquisition of the park, and you'll see the priority placed on the North Park with the secondary priority on the South Park. With your approval today, it will allow staff to proceed in this manner. I'll also bring to your attention, as a part of the acquisition process, we're looking to engage the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority as a consultant for those acquisitions. They have already been retained by the City of Oklahoma City for the other Court Ashore areas, and so we think it would be consistent with the plan to also use them for the park. That's an agreement that we hope to bring back to you next month at your September meeting. And that would allow us to then make payments for consulting services for actual negotiations and property owner contacts and things that will be required to actually do the true acquisition. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding the item.
Everyone has a copy of Exhibit A showing the boundaries in a little less formal sense than the legal description. Yep. Nat?
I had a question. I was looking back through the park information. I couldn't find the answer, but what kind of dictates the fact that the South Park is kind of only 1 block wide instead of 2 like the North? I remember there being some kind of logical constraint, but
these are really recommendations that came forward from the planning department just as a part of the Coeur d'Alene plan. And so this drawing really has not changed as a part of the overall Coeur d'Alene planning process, and then also urban renewals development plans that are also been subsequently approved. I'd have to defer to our planning director, but I think those are just some early studies and some early decisions that were made overall. And we do have Russell Klaus with us today.
Russell, can you help us with this?
Good morning. When we were considering the Coeur d'Alene plan, there were a number of options that were considered, including a 3-block wide park that went all the way from downtown to the river. In the end, the committee elected to compromise in terms of understanding what our capabilities would be in a financial sense in terms of the size of the city and what we could manage for an open space area in that district to settle for the 1 block south of the I-40 alignment, with the understanding that the 2-block park on the north side would be the more formal, the more community-oriented, full community-oriented park, with that park on the south side serving both as a connection from downtown to the river and vice versa, but also to operate more in a neighborhood perspective, so that the residential, which is the directive for development south of I-40, that it would service that. So it's going to be a much more passive, informal kind of development.
Russell, the park does not extend all the way to the river, so I found that a little unusual, I guess, that it didn't incorporate the river at some point.
It connects with, it stops at Southwest 15th Street, but that land south of there is actually already publicly owned. So it does connect to the existing open space system.
I see. Okay. And then I guess the other question, what is looking at the map, kind of an inverted U area that is not part of the land to be acquired, it says, by the Coeur d'Alene acquisition?
Post office, which has already also been acquired by the city of Oklahoma City.
Okay.
Post office and the train station.
I see. That's already owned by the city, and that's that area.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Other comments, Russell? Okay. Well, then, we have before us the resolution establishing the boundaries of the MAP 3 Downtown Public Park and authorizing and directing the acquisition of property for the MAP 3 Downtown Public Park in accordance with the Oklahoma City Coeur d'Alene Urban Renewal Plan using Oklahoma City Capital Improvement Sales Tax Funds. What's your pleasure? Motion's been made and seconded that we accept. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's adopted. The next item is item 4C, which is a recommended resolution approving a memorandum of understanding for planning services. And Eric, you're going to tell us about that?
Be happy to. I think one of the things that you'll notice on your agenda is there's some early tasks that we're taking on as a part of the advisory board, moving certain projects forward. Obviously, with the item that you just approved with the park, we had the item before that with the convention center. This one's in relationship to the transit portion of the MAPS 3 projects. There's also some history on this one as well. And on March 23rd, City Council did approve an MOU with a resolution of intent to work with some other sponsoring agencies to start a formal hub study. And the transit hub is one of the parts of the overall transit plan of MAPS 3. It's not just the streetcar system. That intent went and engaged those agencies, and what's included in your packet is a copy of that for your information. There is a new MOU that's now before you, and we're seeking your recommendation to send that to council for approval, that establishes the participating agencies and the amounts at which they choose to fund. And if you look at the item for Oklahoma City, it's $59,800. So with this is going to allow us to move this process forward, to allow a formal process to begin on the site selection for the hub, or at least the site identification for the hub. The city's participation using MAPS 3 funds does require the recommendation of this advisory board for us to move forward. And so with your approval, we would put this on the next available council meeting for their consideration.
Questions?
I have a question.
Susan?
I'm not saying that this shouldn't go ahead, but I want to keep in mind the convention center site and the point of that transportation connection and the connectivity there. I'm sure it'll be paramount with this also.
I do think those things will come into play, and one of the challenges with a lot of the transit work that we're going to be seeing over the next several years is a lot of the requirements that are for the federal grant programs. And so there is an alternatives analysis that's already underway by the City of Oklahoma City and the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. This is something that they must do as a part of that alternatives analysis, or else it does jeopardize some of their future funding. But clearly, we do need to take everything that's in today in consideration, and I can assure that that will be done. But that's one of the other reasons that we've got to push certain projects forward on an early track versus waiting for them at a later date. But very much so, we'll take that comment in consideration.
Eric, I have one question in that the funds from each of the contributing agencies, is there any contingency if something would happen that those funds may be relinquished?
I don't believe so. The agreement has already been reached with Jacobs Engineering, and so I believe that fee is a fixed fee that's already established, and so I don't believe that a contingency in this case is necessary. But clearly, most of the agreements that we have and others can be amended if additional scope or something were necessary. I don't anticipate that and haven't heard anything about that yet, but if there's any change to the contract, we'll bring that back before you.
Other questions? Well, then we have before us a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding for planning services pertaining to the Intermodal Transportation Hub Study in Central Oklahoma and authorizing the use of Oklahoma City Capital Improvement Sales Tax funds for payment of the city's portion of the cost of the hub study, and the city's portion is set out, and the other agencies, ODOT, COPTA, and ACOG, their portions are set out in the resolution as well. What's your pleasure? Motion's been made to accept the resolution. Is there a second? Motion's been seconded. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's adopted. All right. Item D on your item 4D is a discussion of the MAPS 3 Wellness Centers, and Councilman Larry McAtee is going to share with us some thoughts of the council about this item. Larry?
Thank you, Chairman. Last week at the council meeting, I like the term that we used earlier, a spirited discussion at your subcommittee. A spirited discussion was held up here involving the direction of MAPS 3, and I think I can illustrate the council's, what we'd like to convey by just using a little show and tell if I could. In the crowd, if I call your name, if you'd raise your hand, I'd cheer for it. Jeff Besdick? Right, representing the downtown trolley, very interested in the trolley initiative. Mike Knopp, very interested in what goes on at the river. And then we have Russell Klaus, who's already been up here as an expert on the Cordes Shore Park. And the thought of the council in the discussion was that these different groups have an advocacy behind them pushing their particular initiatives forward, and that's great. That's great. But there was no advocacy group for the wellness centers or a wellness center, one to get started. And so the council asked if I would come to you and tell you that the council is interested in making sure that the wellness center or centers does receive the attention of the advisory committee, and that it proceeds also on a path to provide to our citizens as expeditiously as possible, under the recommendations of the advisory committee and staff, provides a means to get the wellness centers moving forward. And so I told them that I would be happy to do that, not trying to infringe on what decisions that the advisory committee is called to make, but just to say that we, the city council, a number of us, are really interested in advocating for making sure that the wellness center approach does move forward. And I'll take any questions if you have, or whatever the chairman's.
Anyone have a question? Michael?
A few comments, Tom, and I sure want to applaud Councilman McAtee and the council for bringing this issue up. As I think through some of the issues that will be surrounding whenever that subcommittee is formed, I think it really would be helpful to have some help helping define some of those issues that will have to be resolved. For instance, we know that MAPS $3 is capital. That MAPS $3 in no way will be involved with the operations of any of these programs that once they're built. And as I've thought through this and talked to people who might be interested, I have come to the conclusion that there might be opportunities with other institutions in our community that might want to become a part of this effort. Community health centers, educational institutions, there are a number of institutions that might have the expertise and, quite frankly, some operational resources to help make these wellness centers when they do get started. I think that there are so many issues regarding the wellness centers that it would be helpful to have that consultation, or staff for that matter, that takes the time and attention to kind of look at some of the issues. Other issues that come to mind for me have to do with whether we've talked about there may be more than one. No one knows how much these things are going to cost or how many there might be. And if we do proceed with these, with more than one, are they all going to be alike? Are the programs in all of the wellness centers, will they need to be the same? Perhaps there are a lot of differences of when I think of wellness, and I think of able-bodied 55-year-olds and frail elderly 85-year-olds. But I think the problems and the issues that will result from that need some time and attention, and I think it would just be a great idea, again, for the advisory board and the council to kind of have some of those issues addressed to the extent that we're just not starting at square one whenever that subcommittee is formed. I think of other issues. I made some notes because I saw this was going to be on the agenda. I know that with health care reform, assuming Oklahoma doesn't bow out and is a part of health care reform nationally, there will be some opportunities for grants, federal grants, that in this area of wellness. I know there are private foundations, large foundations. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation comes to mind, that has an interest in senior issues and wellness centers. And I just think having some time and attention that kind of gets this issue up alongside some of the others is just a really good idea. And again, I want to applaud Councilman McAtee and the council for bringing this up.
Other discussion?
If I may just echo Mike's sentiments, talking about a lot of the things in healthcare reform, grants and opportunities, there is going to be a plethora available that could help endow what MAPS 3 can do for these centers. And I believe that if we're going to take the same approach as we have on everything, we should be at the forefront of those movements to capture those dollars, if at all possible.
Thank you, Kim. Well, I wanted, Rusty, please.
Yeah, I appreciate all that, Councilman and Mike and Kim. I'm in agreement with all that. What can we do to go ahead and get it started? I know with priorities we haven't determined, that's fine. That seems to be more expenditures of the projects, what we'll spend on. Seems to me it would be a good idea to start moving forward, at least on the planning of this. Do we need to be soliciting names for a subcommittee on the Wellness Center? At least I would suggest maybe we go ahead and try to get that going so that some of the planning can happen. Councilman mentions there's no advocacy group, so maybe that gets that going. And Mike mentions also start getting the institutions that might be interested. So maybe the subcommittee at least, seems like there's no expenditure, so we could get it started, but maybe at least is a subcommittee the way to get the planning rolling, but maybe we need something to even get the subcommittee put together.
Well, that was going to be my question, Councilman. I guess I came into this thinking there were going to be subcommittees that would deal with these. Are you saying that before the appointment of a subcommittee, our committee needs to be doing something about that, or what kind of action, I guess, is Rusty's question. And I think the philosophical question for me is, I kind of think about the appointment of the subcommittees being the first step. Are you all thinking about it not being the first step?
No, don't misinterpret what I said. We're not, quote, thinking about any process, unquote. We believe that's within the purview of this group right here.
Okay.
All that I was commissioned to do was to encourage you to get some dialogue going. And quite frankly, in answer to Rusty's thing, what I would do is defer and ask Eric. Eric, based on what you've heard, would there be some steps that you might recommend that commence?
And I think to address each of the questions, the answer is yes. I mean, obviously, we can forward the comments of the advisory board to help further along the selection of the subcommittee for the wellness centers, and so I will take that as comments from the advisory board and move those forward, but also from the comments that we've already received. And like you've seen on some of the other items, I think there are some early steps that we can begin and start this process with the wellness centers, no different than some of the other projects. Clearly, there are a lot of unknowns in the wellness center portion. At the council meeting, it was made very clear that the resource guide that you received, if you were to go to the tab with the wellness centers, there's no information there because nothing really has been created to date. And we can start that process so that we can engage and move forward. And I know that that's one of the goals of council. And so with the direction of council's report to you today, with the comments that we're receiving now, I can come back to you, I believe, at our next meeting and make a recommendation on a plan that we can move this project, the wellness centers, forward, and we'll proceed from there. I think we'll take into account some of the study and programming that needs to identify what's in a wellness center and some of those basic functions, but that is a starting point, and that's where we could begin.
I have
Susan?
a comment. I think it's been really valuable to grow an understanding in our community on transportation and the different modes and means. And so those community meetings have been great. And it seems to me that we might want to include some conversation with community stakeholders. And it might not be just general public meetings, but we might target some places for some conversations. I'm sure your city staff would have ideas, as well as Mike and other people like that. But with some sharing of potential, this is what it could look like, that dream big thing.
I think it's a very good comment, and we'll definitely take that into consideration, too.
Yes, Dee?
I have a comment going back to the very basics of this wellness center idea, that it's only for senior citizens. And I see if they're going to be great facilities, that it ought to incorporate younger people that we have a huge problem with in the state as far as health and fitness. And I don't understand why it's just narrowed down to, even though I'm over the age to be the senior citizen, why should it be?
And if you would give me the opportunity to explore that further, I know that question has come up previously, and let me further investigate that and bring back a response, a better understanding of that.
Okay.
I have to go back to what Rusty said. I think the driving factor is, what is the priority, or what establishes the priority with which projects are brought before the panel or the board?
So let's visit on that just for a brief moment. As you know, at the last meeting, we were authorized to proceed with the advertising for a program consultant. And as we look at a big picture perspective, we do want to kind of look at the program as a whole and bring back to you a lot of information on how best to package this so that we can successfully and efficiently complete it over the next several years. But during that time, and that will take some time too, we have some opportunities, just like you're seeing today, where we can affect some early packages and some early things that we can get started. And we think the things that we're suggesting to you today for your approval are what we'll call just low-risk items. They're have-to-dos. I mean, we're going to have to cite convention centers. We're going to have to cite hubs. And the park is defined. We need to go ahead and start acquisition. I think there's other projects like we're talking about now with the wellness centers where, again, there's so very little information on that. Regardless of its priority, we would be talking about very minimal, probably, expenditures in the big picture of a $50 million package of wellness centers in MAPS 3 that we could go ahead and formulate a plan to get it started. I don't expect that we're committing all $50 million up front. This would just be like what you've already seen today. And so allow me to put together a plan, taking your comments, and I'll bring that back to you, But it'll be just that. It'll be an early package to start answering some of the questions and getting it rolling, and hopefully in response to council's concerns about it not being left out.
Well, would we then have a consensus that we are asking Eric to bring us a plan at our next meeting for moving forward with the senior, or with the wellness centers, so that we would have it formally incorporated in our minutes, so that Councilman McAtee could, so that the council would know that we heard, that we got the message and we're acting on it? Is there a consensus to do that? All right, well, we're asking you to do that, Eric, and we'd ask that be included in the minutes of the meeting. Thank you. All right, we now go to item 5, presentations. We have Tom Anderson, the Special Project Manager for the Ford Center and the NBA practice facility. Tom, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Good morning.
Appreciate having you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm pleased to be here and happy to have the opportunity to give you a presentation of the history of the Ford Center, where we stand today, and the future for the Ford Center. So, if I may, I understand you have quite an agenda today, so I'll just try to go through this very quickly for you. The background, the Ford Center was built, of course, as part of the original MAPS program. It was strategically located in the downtown district, adjacent to the Bricktown Entertainment District. The facility was constructed with the 1 cent limited purpose sales tax with MAPS, and the design was very flexible. Both of these points, the funding mechanism and the flexible design, are critical components, and as you will see later on in the presentation, deviate from how other municipalities, other government entities have dealt with their arena solutions. The facility broke ground in 1999 and opened its doors in June of 2002. It was completed at an initial cost of $89.2 million. And since its opening, it's hosted more than 7 million event patrons. In fiscal year 2009, we had 1.1 million guests at the Ford Center, with a direct spending economic impact of $98.8 million, and that's considering the fact that the Ford Center was actually closed for renovations for 5 months out of that fiscal year. Since its opening, it's generated more than $500 million in direct consumer spending benefiting the Oklahoma City economy, and that doesn't include any indirect spending. That's direct spending only. Of course, the Ford Center is home to the NBA Thunder basketball, and we've hosted many key collegiate athletic events, including NCAA men's basketball first and second rounds back in 2003 and 2005, NCAA Division I wrestling championship, Big 12 men's and women basketball championships in 2007, 2009. Of course, the women's championship was over at the Cox Center, and the women's regionals in 2008 and 2009. In terms of concerts, we've had many major concerts at the Ford Center. Besides Paul McCartney, we've had Eric Clapton twice, the Rolling Stones, The Who, Cher twice, Michael Bublé, George Strait, Kenny Chesney, recently Lady Gaga, Tim McGraw, Faith Hill, Toby Keith, Tool. We've been rated among the top 25 concert facilities in Pulsar magazine. We've had numerous televised events, including the All-College Basketball Classic, Bonanza, and numerous family shows as well. This is one of the points I wanted to touch on. I don't want to pick on other cities, but as a case point, most cities and governmental entities fund their arenas using bond funds. And it was a wise decision by city leaders and by the citizens of Oklahoma City to use the dedicated sales tax as a funding mechanism. The other thing that was very wise was the design of the Ford Center, because it gave us flexibility to change and meet the needs of changes in the market to meet current tenant needs. As an example, the Miami Arena, it was built in 1988 for $52 million, home of the Miami Heat. And in the late 90s, it was starting to kind of show its age. It didn't have the kind of amenities that the NBA team needed, particularly it didn't have the suites, didn't have the concessions areas, needed to drive those kind of revenue streams. And it didn't have the ability to be renovated to accommodate that. So the major league tenants relocated to other facilities. It ended up being sold at auction for $24 million, and ultimately it was demolished in 2008. The owner tried to have that site reused as another sports facility, but it met with tremendous opposition and was unsuccessful in that endeavor. You can cite many examples of this. The Kingdome in Seattle was paid for with city bonds, and it was demolished in 2000, in the year 2000, and it'll be 2015 before the bonds are paid off. And the same thing happened in the city of Charlotte with the Charlotte Arena. The Hornets relocated to New Orleans when they were unable to get a new arena built, and that facility was demolished. A new arena was built, and so bonding, flexibility with the arena is very, very important. We have that with the Ford Center. I'd like to talk a little bit about the renovation expansion. Right now, we've got 581,000 square feet with the Ford Center. The expansion will add almost 90,000 square feet to the Ford Center for a total of 670,000 square feet. Our goals and objectives, obviously, for a long time, we've had the goal of securing a Major League Sports franchise tenant. We've attained that now with the NBA Thunder. We want to maximize the patron experience, both for NBA events and for concerts, all events in the Ford Center. We want to maintain our competitive stature in the marketplace. Obviously, 90 miles northeast of us, we've got a brand new arena that we're competing with. And we want to ensure the long-term financial stability of the NBA franchise. With these renovations, it's giving them more inventory to sell, the suites, electronic advertising, more food and beverage opportunities, that kind of thing, and we want to maintain the financial stability of Ford Center. Again, that goes back to financing. With the pay-as-you-go program, we were debt-free, and so it gave us the flexibility to operate the facility without having to subsidize it from the general fund or other funding sources. The sports facility sales tax is what is funding the Ford Center upgrades and renovation project, as well as the NBA practice facility. The original sales tax estimates were prepared in the fall of 2007, shortly after ownership of the Seattle Supersonics had declared their interest in relocating from Seattle to Oklahoma City. So the sales tax estimates were prepared. City Council had to call an election in December so that it could take place in March of 2008. And initial plans for the Ford Center were designed at that time. Funding, ultimately, unexpected by anyone, the economy went south, and rather than the $121 million projected, we ended up collecting $103.5 million in sales tax. Now, concurrent with the sales tax approved by voters, as you most likely are aware, Council has the authority to pass a companion use tax. Now, the use tax was dedicated in priority to supplement, number one, supplement any deficit in or shortfall in the dedicated sales tax. If there were funds left over, they could be used for other city projects. So right now we're projecting that we have approximately $112 million available for the projects. And at this point, I should say and give credit to the formation of the Sports Facility Oversight Board, which I work with. They've been very dedicated. Councilman McAtee, along with two other council persons, sit on that board, and we meet monthly and review all items prior to going to City Council, very much as this board does. One of the first projects that occurred was a relocation of the I-40 Robinson Street off-ramp. The original off-ramp is on the left. You might recall it just kind of looped off of I-40 to the west onto Robinson Avenue. Well, we needed to reclaim quite a bit, or as much land as possible, because there was going to be a new southwest expansion of the Ford Center, a new entrance which would also encompass a restaurant and new club and some other amenities. So we needed to reclaim some land, so we went from that turnoff to a traditional T-shaped intersection, which you can see on the right side of the screen. That was accomplished early on at a cost of about $1.3 million. When the City of Seattle and the ownership of the Sonics settled the court case in July of 2008, we suddenly realized, well, we're going to be playing NBA basketball here in October of 2008, and we've got a couple of months to get ready for it. So we had some early start programs, which included the acquisition of basketball equipment, including a new floor, remodeling some existing restrooms, conversion of some storage space to a new pub, pre-wiring for cameras and information technology, game lighting upgrades, and FF&E. And these are just some photos. There's the new NBA floor. This is what the restrooms pretty much throughout the arena looked like before the upgrades. We kind of like to say that we went from high school to Hyatt. So that was before the upgrades. This is after. And there's no, there's no class warfare here. You can have a $10 ticket, sit in the 300 level, and have the same quality amenity in the restrooms as if you bought, a seat on the 200 level. And there are the event level restrooms. This is the shot of the pub. This was previously a storage area on the event level that was accomplished as part of the early phase. Completed projects that were done during the 5 months that we were closed in 2009. Arena seating, we added terrace clubs, the concourse renovation on the 300 level, locker room build out for the Thunder, a new courtside club, upgrades to the existing suites, broadcast upgrades, point of sale equipment, new scoreboard, and replaced all the TVs with the better technology. This demonstrates the seating upgrade on the telescopic seating. We went from these were really the most uncomfortable seats in the building to now on the right you can see we've got faux leather seats. They're much more comfortable, and patrons seem to enjoy them a great deal more. This is a shot from the arena looking in at one of the terrace clubs. What we did at both ends is we took out the existing suites and made an area where there's food and beverage available, have these loge boxes, which are called terrace suites. They're like a suite without walls and seating underneath it. So actually you could be up in a food and beverage area and look over and into the arena. This is an amenity that's common in most of the modern arenas that we didn't have. And again, this is an example of the flexibility of Ford Center. That's a shot of one of the interior of one of the terrace clubs. This is a shot of the renovation of the third floor concourse. On the left, actually that was in transition while work was going on, but it was rather stark. The lighting was not very good. It was kind of cave-like. After the renovation, we went in and we polished concrete, put down colors, replaced the lighting, put in flat panel TVs, just added a lot of life to that third 300-level concourse. This is the courtside club on the event level. Interestingly enough, and again about flexibility, initially this was a storage area, and when we had events that would call for like an equine event, we would actually store livestock in this area. And when we had arena football, this area was built out as an arena football locker room. When the Hornets temporarily came here for 2 years, it was converted and used as the Hornets locker room. Now it's converted again, and it's a courtside club. The suite upgrades we've gone through, and the 36 suites have received a complete facelift. We have a new amenity now, bunker suites. These are the highest price point suites in the building. There are 8 on the event level, and they're all sold. We have 2 on the concourse level that are available for daily rent. Broadcast and media control room. This facility is new to the building. When the Hornets were here for NBA broadcast, they actually had to park a semi-trailer up next to the building in order to accommodate television broadcasts. This building will not only accommodate those, but it also controls the scoreboard and other electronic video amenities inside the arena bowl. That's the old scoreboard being taken down, and the new one, it was twice the size of the original scoreboard, fully digital. And you might note the wedge at the bottom, that's a 6-millimeter wedge, which enables folks that have seats that are either courtside or very close to the floor to see what's going on the scoreboard, see the action, whereas previously it was really kind of difficult for people in those seats to see what was on the scoreboard. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first scoreboard of its kind in the NBA that has that wedge, and it's my understanding that there are other teams that are looking at implementing something similar. Work in progress. We've got interior renovations going on right now throughout the facility, renovating the concession stands. That work is being wrapped up right now. Ford Center administrative offices, which they've never really had for the staff, and various AV and locker room upgrades, and again, FF&E. These are a little bit dated. They're almost done with the concession stands that are being renovated. And again, this will be ready for the upcoming basketball season. This is a little dated too. The build-out of the administrative offices for the staff at Ford Center. We have a team store and a little additional work to be done on the staff offices. This scope of work should be complete by November 12th, and we expect that to cost in the range of about $850,000. The final phase, which is the estimated to be the most costly, will be the southwest expansion of the Ford Center. Again, this was why we changed that I-40 Robinson Street ramp. We expect to bid out and start construction of the exterior portion of this project this fall. Now, there's no reason why we can't start on the exterior work during the basketball season. It won't interrupt any activities inside the building. So that's the plan. We'll start building out on the outside during the season. The total project's estimated to cost about $39 million.
Tom, if I may, to bring
Yes,
this
sir.
in a little bit of perspective, realize that if you go back one slide, Tom, the vantage point that you're standing is the current I-40, which is a part of the boulevard that we discussed in an earlier presentation, that will eventually be removed when the new I-40 is open. This will actually front the northeast corner of the new Central Park. And so this is that view that you would have theoretically from that park once constructed. And so the whole entry of the Ford Center is being reversed off of Reno Avenue to the southwest view. And so you can kind of see all the work that's been underway with the Ford Center, this being one of the final projects, one of the more elaborate and more expensive. But again, it's all in the larger plan for the downtown renovation.
Thank you, Eric. That's an excellent point. We were trying to be forward-thinking. Right now, we've got the two main entrances on the northeast and northwest. 60% of the traffic comes in on the northeast. But this is looking forward towards the Central Park and the boulevard, and we anticipate this will be used very heavily. Again, there will be a restaurant on the right side and a club on the left. There'll be an ancillary ticket office, and the exterior will start this fall. We'll close the building again at the end of this coming NBA season, and what we'll do then is join the new exterior with the existing structure and then go in and do renovations on the first floor concourse, and that will complete the project. And there's a rendering of what that interior new southwest concourse will look like. Wow. It'll feature a family fun zone, upscale dining, an entry-level club, and it will have NBA Thunder offices, about 30,000 square feet of office space for the Thunder. If I could go back just real quickly, obviously we've had some challenges since the sales tax did not reach its desired goal, and we have been able to supplement that with the use tax, which helps. We've had also some fortune. Originally, the NBA practice facility was budgeted at $20 million. We ended up getting an excellent bid on the construction of the practice facility itself, which came in at about $10 million, a little over $10 million. The land acquisition itself was budgeted at $2 million. We ended up acquiring it at $500,000. So right now, we're projecting the practice facility project will come in at approximately $15 million. The Ford Center project, we believe, will come in at around $92 million. So combined, we are looking at probably $106, $108 million, right in that range. So we believe that we'll have contingency sufficient to go into the final phase, the largest phase of Ford Center, with a contingency sufficient to cover any potential change orders that may be necessary. Hopefully there won't be any or be very few. And then at the end of that project, if there's available funding left over, we'll go back and look at any listed enhancements that we'd like to put on Ford Center and perhaps look at reinstating those. So the quality of the project to date has met with just fabulous reviews from patrons, from the team, from the media, and we intend to complete the projects in the same caliber, and there's no reason to think otherwise. Bring it in within the costs that are forecast and within the funds that are available. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
I was going to ask Councilman McAtee if he wanted to comment. He's on that commission. Thought maybe he might want to share with us his thoughts about it.
Well, if you look at what was going on there, you see that what you're challenged with in this advisory committee is a much bigger task than what our little committee was, because we were looking at one project and you are looking at 8. But there's some interesting nuances within the Ford Center which has contributed to its success, which hopefully I would challenge us on this committee to follow forward with. One of the things, if you noticed, is there's amenities in that development process that's going along that's benefited every user group in the organization. For example, the 300 level, where our patrons who pay the least amount of revenue for a ticket, whether it's a Thunder ticket or a concert, they have amenities that have already benefited them, from the restrooms to the concourse. There are also benefits to the high rollers, if you want to, in the bunker suites and some of the private clubs that are in there. There's amenities in there to improve the operations of the basketball team and also for the benefit of the NBA. And so if you put a project together that gives the different constituents groups who are using those projects benefits as you go along, you find that the reports that come back are very, very favorable. And that's what Tom was saying. The number of complaints on the renovation in the Ford Center that have gotten to the advisory committee, to our committee, you probably could count on one hand, if even that many. So it's been a very successful project. The other lesson that's learned, since we had budgeted originally $120 million, we only end up with roughly $112 million, and it's going to be done on budget. And that's another task that Eric and his staff, along with Tom, have done an excellent job in making sure that we come in on time and on budget. And so hopefully we'll be able to carry that success forward with our MAPS 3 projects.
Thank you, Larry. Eric, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I don't have anything else to add, but thank you, Tom. And again, as we just kind of look forward, there's some real visual things that we're going to be seeing, but then again, if you're a patron or visitor to the Ford Center, I think you've just got an inside look as to what to expect in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you being here. Next is item B under Roman numeral 5. We're going to call on our friend Russell Klaus again to give us the ULI final report. Russell?
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. Pleasure to be back so soon. The Court Ashore plan, which I presented to you a couple of months ago, is a very ambitious plan in terms of its scope. It's a large area of land and has a very long time frame for implementation. And whenever you're dealing with a project of that scale and implementation time frame, you want to try and get some affirmation that what you've got in the plan is the right direction to be going in. So we thought it was a good idea to engage another external group of experts to help us with this, and the Urban Land Institute provide this kind of service, these panels that they bring into a community. It's a real quick hit process. They come in for 5 days, they take information for 2 days, they analyze all that, and then they give you a report several months later, which is what we now have. Kirk Humphreys, former Mayor Kirk Humphreys, helped with this. He raised half of the funds to support the ULI report, and we appreciate his help in that because he also recognized that this is an important thing to do. So they were here in early March, and they just recently submitted their report. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview, basically, of what they came up with. They affirmed that in scale and scope and the vision of the plan, that the plan is sound in terms of what it is attempting to accomplish. They came up with 5 sort of guiding principles there that they felt were important, and if you asked any number of other experts to evaluate the Court Ashore plan, would probably come up with those same things as key elements of the plan that you want to carry forward. So these are the 5 big ideas. The Harvey Spine, that connection between downtown and the river, the whole concept of connecting downtown and the river and using that Harvey alignment to do that, they thought was an excellent organizing principle. The civic spaces, the green spaces that we included in there, the Court Ashore Park that we've talked about early today, as well as the Promenade Park and the open space that we have along the river already. That whole system of open space is such an important fundamental organizing element around the spine and in support of the development that we expect to go on in this area. So that was another no-brainer in terms of the approach that was taken with the Court Shore plan. And eventually we would expect to integrate that open space with the open space that we're currently in the process of reformatting downtown. The Myriad Gardens is going through a remodel, as will the Bicentennial Park, Kerr Couch Park. Basically all of our open space in the downtown area is also being reformatted. So eventually we will want to look at how all of that works together and works for what we intend the city to grow into. The convention center and convention center hotel and other hotels that they suggested with the convention center would be able to support, these are really important for us in terms of who we are as a destination city, and these are fundamental building element for the further growth of Oklahoma City. So no questions in terms of that being there. Of course, there are questions about location. I'll get into that. A large part of the Court Shore plan is focused on residential, and they see that as fundamentally sound, very important for supporting everything that we have going on in the downtown area, and a natural use for a lot of the Court Shore area because of its location, that proximity to downtown and proximity to the river. So that made sense. They also highlighted the fact that by connecting to the river, that encourages further interest along the river in terms of its economic development potential. And we're seeing that already. The Boathouse District is going gangbusters. We've got other proposals along the river. We've got the Indian Cultural Center under construction on the east and the Dell Center on the west, with some additional hotels now going on adjacent to Meridian on 15th Street. So it's all starting to come together as well. So that, again, was something else that they saw as important. They recommended 9 implementation priorities, and I think it's important to point out that most of these we are already working on, and if not working on, are at least aware that we need to be working on as soon as we can find the time and resources to do that. So the Convention Center and the Convention Center Hotel, the hotel is not part of the MAPS project, but we recognize that you cannot do a convention center of this scale without the hotel. So that is something that falls back on city leadership to be able to find a solution in terms of being able to meet that need. The Boulevard, they recognized the value of that as a gateway into downtown and said that that does need to be, as indicated in the Court Shore plan, an exemplary street, one of the most important streets in the city and certainly the best street in the downtown area. Central Park, we already talked about, street and streetscape improvements. Some of those are already incorporated in the last GEO bond issue, so some of that is already done. Recognizing that this is a long-term plan, we would anticipate that those additional improvements that are required as additional development is proposed in the coming decades, that those will be incorporated in the GEO bond or the CIP and other funding mechanisms as we go forward. And probably I would anticipate that at some point in time we will look at the establishment of a tax increment financing district in this area, but that's a little premature at this point. Residential development, east and west, and we will begin to start looking at how to accomplish that as we develop the park. We've already included some of that land in the acquisition priority area, so we're anticipating that the next moves to make that happen, but it will take time to do that. We have been negotiating with OG&E now for some time, the substation and their headquarter facility down there. We anticipated that those would have to move or would be reprogrammed, at least in terms of their operations center. And so we've been working with them on what that will entail, what it will cost. This is all part of a much larger OG&E distribution discussion that's going on in terms of being able to provide the energy needs for downtown, including Bricktown. Bricktown has had some blackout history in the past, and this is all part of that much larger reprogramming of provision of services there. The river's edge, recognizing that water is always attractive for residential development, and so they recognized that was important and have emphasized that, and the Harvey Spine. Differences, and we did anticipate that there would be differences between the Court Shore plan and a different set of experts who come into town. I don't think any of these in any way diminish the intent of the Court Shore plan. These are just different ways of looking at things, and we will take this information, and as we go through the process of developing the plan over time, we expect that the plan will evolve. So this is just part of that evolution of our thought process on this. They did not like the convention center in the location proposed on the Court Shore plan. They suggested that it would be better located just east of the rail line there, basically on the same latitude, but where the lumberyard site is there, just south of the Harkins Theatre. But as we've discussed, I think there's a lot more work to do in terms of determining that location. So that was their opinion. The boulevard width, they suggested was too wide. They suggested something not more than 110 feet wide. We have had that suggestion now from several different consultants who've looked at the downtown area. Hargraves and Associates, who developed the concept plan for the park, and Jeff Speck, who did the walkability plan, have all suggested that the boulevard width be a lot narrower than indicated on the Court Shore plan. So I'd anticipate that's probably the direction we will go in. But we're just about to go into design consultations with Department of Transportation, so that will be part of the consideration there. The Court Shore plan had anticipated a mixed-use development on the north side of the boulevard between the boulevard and the Myriad Gardens. They did not believe that the retail component of that would work. They also had doubts about the office component. That was part of a plan that really has such a long-term time frame that it could happen over that 50 years, but in the short term they did not anticipate that there's going to be any market to support that. They suggested that that kind of retail development would be much better positioned over in the Bricktown area, that destination retail, and that the Court Shore area would be a better place for local service retail. So on the boulevard itself, cafes and small restaurants, and also those kind of facilities scattered throughout to support the residential development, but not that destination retail. The office development with the vacancy rate that we have and the sort of reconfiguration as a result of the Devon building, that there's some vacancy that will need to be filled, and they did not believe that the market is going to support anything other than a build-to-suit. So if we had a new headquarters moved to town, it's still a very good place to build a headquarters, but we don't have that on the books. So the river, Court Shore plan kind of is focused more on the north side of the boulevard and so peters out towards the river. They said we should put more attention in terms of recognizing the value of that riverfront for development, and I would agree with that completely. The Promenade Park, we did ask them to look at the location, whether it's located in the right place adjacent to Robinson. They left it where it was, but they did suggest perhaps narrowing it by engaging both sides of Robinson and putting residential on both sides, which also makes sense and was what we'd anticipated as part of the redevelopment in that area as well. Investment priorities, they had recommended that as we move forward with this, that we want to do more detailed planning. The Court Shore plan is a 10,000-foot plan. As we get down to developing each of the individual neighborhoods and development areas there, that we're going to have to do more detailed planning. And that's something to be anticipated. We appreciate their recognizing that as well. The Court Shore plan anticipates high quality in the type of development, and so they have recommended that we do put a focus on developing design standards and design techniques to ensure that we get the kind of quality development there right from the outset, so that it's going to continue to support quality development in the area. I think that's another key recommendation that we completely agree with. Acquisition of land is already underway. Basic infrastructure also underway. Financing techniques, and we're always looking for more creative financing techniques, but I think we have a pretty good grasp on that. So a lot of this is stating the obvious. And then public-private partnerships to accomplish the housing. The market is not going to support the kind of high-quality development in housing in the early stages of the Quarter Shore plan, and so they anticipated that there would be some level of support required to support the private sector doing support from the public, supporting the private sector to ensure that we get that quality development. Again, that's something that we anticipated. We do believe that we want to provide for a range of different price points for housing down there. So when you get down to that workforce housing market, that to get the quality, we are going to probably have to inject some subsidy into that to make that work. Next steps is the open space plan that I talked about, not only for the Quarter Shore area, but about integrating that with what we have in the existing downtown core. So looking at the programming, looking at the services and the amenities provided by each of these particular open space areas so that we're providing the greatest diversity of amenities and attractions to ensure that people are coming downtown using the open space system on a repeat basis, and that we continue to draw new people into downtown using that as the attractant. Because I-40 is changing the access points into downtown, at least from the south, they recommended that we develop an access and circulation plan, a master plan for that. 180 is, of course, changing things around as well, with changing one-way streets to two-way. So they recommended that we put all of that together from probably 13th Street down to the river and understand how the traffic pattern is going to work in that area in the longer term. The neighborhood plans for each residential district, they did stress, as Quarter Shore proposes several different residential neighborhoods down there, that each of these have their own distinctive quality, and that they be built around particular amenities, that there be something very different and attractive there that distinguishes them from any other product in the market. And that, again, is something that we had anticipated would happen. That's going to be something a little different from what we've done in the past, but I think it's absolutely essential for the sustainability of the Quarter Shore area over the long term. Streetscape is an important part of the appearance and what makes Quarter Shore attractive, so having a master plan to ensure that that all is tied together and works with what we're doing with 180, I think, is extremely important. And the design quality I've already mentioned. They stressed again and again through the report that this plan implementation is going to take a long time to accomplish, 50 years, which is a time frame that I've frequently mentioned, and that to do that and to be able to ensure that you have that consistency in support for plan implementation, that you need to create a new entity that will last beyond the time frames of any individual players, so that the plan itself has that support structure that endures for its entire lifespan, because I don't think I'll be here for the 50 years for implementation. And we would agree completely with that. Anything of this scale is going to require that level of stewardship, and so this is something that we will, as the resources permit, attempt to create. Flexibility, and then marketing and branding the area. While we build these particular MAPS projects within the Quarter Shore plan area, we are going to have to do some fairly aggressive marketing to ensure that we facilitate that development interest in the area, and that we get people excited about not only living and working and playing in the area, but just the value that this adds to us as a destination city. They had a number of other recommendations. These are smaller recommendations they included in the plan. More crossings for I-40, because it is still a major barrier between downtown and the river. It's not as depressed as we would have originally liked. So they recommended that there be additional both vehicular and pedestrian crossings across I-40, and I think that's an excellent idea. They looked at trying to add some more aesthetic interest to the boulevard, so perhaps putting a slight curve or a monument or a roundabout somewhere along the length of the boulevard so that it is more appealing. They also recommended extending it to the west, which is probably a little too ambitious for us at this point in time. That might be the 100-year time frame. East-west connections through the area. Well, we use the Harvey Spine as that north-south connection. You do have all that open space that adjoins the Harvey Spine, so it's important that you ensure that you've got that you maintain those east-west connections. So you've got residential neighborhoods on either side of the park, that there's a feeling that it's all still connected. Arts and cultural facilities, again, this is just a sort of a general given in terms of development of a downtown environment, is to ensure that you have as many arts and cultural attractions as possible, and incorporating those into the Quarter Shore area is important as well. Education, the Quarter Shore plan had anticipated an elementary school. ULI recommended, and I would agree with that we go beyond that and take that from before school. We do have a shortage of daycare in the downtown area now, and taking it all the way through the high school, and you could provide, and even up through college as well. They liked the idea that at that point in time, the OCU Law School was anticipating moving downtown, and we do hope that those kind of moves will happen in the future, and I understand the current economic climate, but that makes a lot of sense. Any facility, any downtown that has college environment downtown does so much to enliven the activity in the downtown area. The open space plan, the convention center, they had a recommendation on the existing convention center, because that does give us a competitive edge in some respects, because we can maintain that facility until it becomes obsolete, and it gives us that the additional arena there, which is already proven very valuable for the NCAA. I don't know who we had, I forget now. But we had different, the basketball tournament, the 16, that proved to be very useful there. But also just having that additional meeting space as well for overflow, and just gives us a little more flexibility there. They did not believe that with the current market with residential that we should look at too much for sale, and recommended that we look at probably over 50% in the Quarter Shore area being rental. So, but that'll change as the market changes. The market will respond to what it is, and that is the point of keeping the plan flexible, so it can respond to the market. The key point is to ensure we get the quality there. And then extending the river into residential areas, the Quarter Shore plan had some water that sort of extended out from the river into the residential area, and they thought that was a good idea and suggested we take it even further. We have more water there. More shoreline means higher value and more attractiveness for residential development. So happy to answer any questions.
And we've included a complete copy of the report in your packet so that you do have the complete version, and that was also provided to council last week. But with that, I think just the general takeaway from the presentation is, it is confirming several of the MAPS 3 projects. Obviously the park, it confirms the convention center and the need for it, conventions a lot of the river improvements and activities. I think the other thing on the agenda today, it also confirms that the site for the convention center is not selected. And that's why we're initiating this study, to go ahead and formally start that process. And again, we appreciate Russell and any questions, of course, that you may have.
Daniel?
Thank you for your update on this. This is very good information, and I do encourage other board members to read the full presentation and watch the video of from the March presentation, because there are a couple things that are very relevant to us. And the obvious one is the convention center and what's talked about there, but also maybe a little bit less obvious is when you talk about what type of properties are around the Central Park, that may influence what's in the Central Park. So if you have more rental, maybe that's younger people, maybe that's more singles, I don't know. If it's owned homes, then that's probably more families. So that does influence what's in the park. So it's important for us all to educate ourselves on that. But also transit was mentioned, and we only have so many miles to work with on the transit system. But with this Quarter Shore plan, we're going to have a lot more residents just south of where we're currently thinking about. In the public meetings for transit, is all shown a kind of a fixed blockage area that doesn't go far enough south for Quarter Shore. It also doesn't go far enough north for that residential concentration. So we need to be mindful of that. We only have so many miles to work with, but there is the alternatives analysis that will help us get federal money to extend it. So we need to kind of have that forward thinking of designing a system with the mileage, with the money that we have, that will also enable extending north and south to these residential centers. And then, so that's the second comment. And then the other question is, this was talking about how the OG&E Center needs to be moved regardless and not in the context of the convention center. So then I have to ask, how come part of the money for the convention center includes moving the OG&E station if it has to be moved regardless of where the convention center is?
And let me respond to that, and I think I'm just going to use the mayor's response, and if we need, we can do additional follow-up. But obviously, in the early discussions with council as they were developing the projects, the need, or at least the desire to relocate that substation came into play, and I think the question came up, should it be its own project, or should it be something that's just incorporated as an overall part of an existing project, one of the original 8? And I think the mayor's responded that the decision was made that it would just be incorporated with the convention center project. I know that there are some challenges as to how well it's documented and such, but coming from the mayor's discussion, that was the intent. And so that's definitely something that we're going to have to work through and formalize as a part of this MAPS 3 process. But the best answer I can give is the one that the mayor's already provided.
So we'll just need to be mindful that, especially as far as, like you said, documenting it, especially if the convention center isn't next to the park, then it would, we'd have to illustrate that, yes, we acknowledge that the station's being moved for other reasons besides where the convention center is, but so that's just something to...
And I hope everybody's mindful of...
For lawyers to work with, I guess.
I'm sorry.
Eric, it is part of a larger system reformat there, and it also includes the undergrounding of transmission lines that would cross the Central Park and the Promenade Park. So all of that is involved in that discussion as well. So it's not just the substation itself, but it's the entire distribution system.
And I think as you guys become more familiar with that area, I think you're probably aware of that facility that is down there. And so some of the other questions that come up is, will it be compatible with the new projects that are in that area? If you will visit that location, you'll find a lot of those high towers and heavy wires and things, and Russell's correct. There are some transmission lines and other things that have to be relocated as a part of the park project, and some of that will come with natural relocations of facilities like the substation. But again, I will take that charge on us as the advisory board in working forward through those processes, whether it be convention center or the park, or a relationship among the several projects that are before us.
Rusty?
A little unrelated, but we've mentioned the boulevard a few times today. We had a presentation earlier on the boulevard, and the question of the funding came up. All we had was a verbal commitment at the time. It's my understanding there's been an update. The state has included it in their 8-year plan. Because the boulevard is so important, we've heard about it today, one of you mind confirming, is that right? My understanding is it's fully funded in the 8-year plan. Is that correct?
I do understand that it's in the 8-year plan and the amount that was approved. I think that there is a question whether the amount approved is what the actual cost of the project is today, but there has been funding allocated, allowing it to move forward. And so I know Dennis Clowers made that presentation before, and we'll also keep you updated on that project as well. But yes, in the 8-year plan, and an amount has been established.
Other questions for Russell? Russell, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. We go to item 6. We have some informational items. Subsection A, the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority contract, and Eric's going to tell us about that.
You have 4 additional contracts that we've included as informational items today. There have already been 5 that we have brought to you at previous meetings just for information, and these are leading up to the agreement that I previously mentioned with Okura, the Urban Renewal Authority, as an agent that we would propose using to acquire land in the park. And so these are contracts that they have already engaged. Again, they're just for information. There are 2 or 3 additional contracts that will be on a future meeting that we'll also provide. But this just is to give you the full background of the level of services that are going to be incorporated as a part of a more formal agreement. Again, they're for your info, and I can answer questions if you have any on these.
Any questions about any of these contracts? All right, then. Let's move to 6B. We have a letter that's included in your packet from the Oklahoma City Boathouse Foundation. Mike Knopp is here. I'm going to call on Eric to explain to us the purpose of today's agenda item.
And so again, this is informational. We wanted to bring this to your attention, and it is a letter from Mike and he's here and can also assist in any questions that you might have. But there is obviously like other projects, and need to possibly look at some early packages also for the river. Obviously, there's a lot of activity down on the Oklahoma River now with events being scheduled and some more significant events that are upcoming summer of 2011. So as you look at this list, two that you'll find at the very top, this windscreen and the lighting for night racing capabilities, are two that they currently provide on a temporary basis or don't have at all, and are really needed to enhance the competitive nature of what the promoting sport is down on the river. We're looking at these and bringing these to your attention so that we may, at a future meeting, prepare additional packages to do some early design or possibly early programming and construction on these. Again, not to take on the full river project as a whole, looking at all of the improvements on the river, but looking at some of these smaller packages that we could get started on a shorter time frame that would also benefit Oklahoma City Boathouse Foundation and their river events for things that have already been planned. So I would invite your attention to review this, and barring any concerns, we are preparing and we'll bring back to you for consideration some early information for consideration on promoting this and moving forward.
Michael?
Yes, Eric and Tom, I know this is, of course, an informational item on the agenda, but I'd just like to say for the record that I think this is a great opportunity to, I don't know about the rest of you, but I get calls all the time about what's going on with MAPS, when are some of these projects going to be started, and of course we all know that these things take time, but I think this really is an opportunity to show the community that we're doing something now, and I think just reading about that would be just a really appropriate kind of timing. I started to say it's not much money, and I guess everything's relative. $6 million or so is obviously a lot of money to me, but in the scheme of things and in the monthly collections from MAPS, it seems to me that it would be something that I hope is seriously considered.
Mike, why don't you come to the podium? Would you? We may have some questions. I'd like to hear your thought on why an early package would be advantageous for the river.
Well, as I presented a couple of months ago, we do have a lot of great momentum in play right now at the river. In fact, today there's the national championship going on for USA Canoe Kayak, and we've been garnering additional national and international attention due to the current development going on with the Boathouse District, and it's attracting new events, which are obviously going to make a great economic impact on Oklahoma City. Very substantial events, one being the U.S. Masters National Championship that's going to be next August. And we, in the past, as we've put on these events, and we've had well over 30 events since the river has the original MAPS project, we've had to kind of make the venue work, and it's worked quite well, although we are always at risk with certain factors such as the wind issues that can occur, also having to bring in the lighting for our events, and other infrastructure for just putting on a really world-class event experience that we certainly want to promote. Because of this current momentum that we have, and as an Olympic training site, we're very protective. We want to preserve that, especially as we look at the future of what all of these MAPS projects collectively will bring together. But with the river project, when it's fully complete, we're going to have this, what we've suggested be one of the world's premier venues, and we just want to do some very strategic things early on to make sure we preserve that, so we don't have a situation with a lot of publicity that will come with an event and risk something like, some of the wind issues that may occur, or have to not, really showcase the city in the most favorable light, with certain infrastructure that we could do early. So that was really the intent of that letter, is to address some very strategic things early on and help protect that momentum and build upon it.
Mike, one of the things that I think was implied in your letter I want to ask you directly about that Eric mentioned, these things that you're asking for early on have been in the plan that has been presented publicly in many venues when MAPS 3 was being considered. Is there any concern has there been any concern raised about doing any of these, or are these pretty well the accepted things that everyone anticipates being included in these projects?
Oh, these are all components of the full package that was presented in with the MAPS 3 proposal, and there's nothing new here. It's just, what we're going to have to do is continue to refine, for example, the windscreen. There's going to be some technical analysis that needs to occur, and then also with the lighting and how you light the river. Those are the things that we're going to need to do and start working on here relatively soon as we propose. But there's nothing new in this proposal. It's all what was originally presented.
And from a staff perspective, in response to that, obviously, because some of them are well-defined, and like we're doing on some others, we could engage consultants, especially consultants that Mike is mentioning for the lighting or the wind packages, and go ahead and get some of that early work out of the way. We're not suggesting that we go immediately into construction. We're talking about the consulting portion of that now, which would be a smaller fee than what's being proposed here. This would be an all-inclusive cost for all the projects that are being requested, and so we'll analyze these individually. I know that we met with Mike about a week ago, and there is a focus on the top two here just for some upcoming events. But it's obviously a work in progress, and we do want to continue on some of those early successes, build on the momentum not just on the river, but some of the other projects, and build momentum on ones that have not yet started. And so as we package this in perspective, we still have several months before we get the bigger picture. We would believe that these are low-risk items that we can press forward on. And again, make a difference. So I am open to receive any comments that you might have as we get ready to move forward on this somewhat.
Rusty?
Yep. Similar to the discussion we had earlier on subcommittees, seems like in the event the board and the council did want to move forward on this sooner than later, is the subcommittee not something we need to be sure put together sooner so that we don't have a delay? Or maybe you're already working on that. I'm just curious, is that, again, maybe a starting point, jumping off point in the event we move forward?
And I think it would apply to all the projects that don't yet have a subcommittee. I do know the mayor is actively working on assignments to those, and so I think as we, I'm sure that he is aware, and I'll make sure that he is that is a preference of this board that we go ahead and engage those subcommittees, and just know that my conversation with him is that is an active activity that he's doing now.
He confirmed that to me yesterday. I talked to him yesterday, and he said that, of course, these people have to be contacted, and they have to agree to serve, and they have to get recommendations from the council, and so it's a process that doesn't just happen in the short term, but they are actively working on that. And so I think the decision that we're thinking about is, should we ask staff to go forward and bring us a recommendation at our next meeting to take some early start action. Excuse me, Rusty, go ahead.
Are you speaking of the river in particular? I don't know, it might be hard to do all the subcommittees, but you mean the river in particular with his presentation, and if we think it might move forward, I think in particular the river subcommittee might meet.
I don't believe that the river subcommittee is the one that is next. The one that I believe is on for Tuesday is actually the park committee, and so I do know that all of them are active, and I know the mayor has a plan to try to enact those on a schedule, but the river I don't believe is next. It will be the Central Park.
He did. I agree with Eric. He did tell me that there was a plan in place to get the subcommittee announced in a really regular, systematic fashion, and so I think it will be. I think it will come in a relatively short period of time. But I guess our question for today is: do we feel comfortable with asking staff to work with Mike and bring us back a recommendation for action as some kind of an early start here?
I would.
Particularly, I think we need to let the public see that we are moving forward on some of these projects. So, yeah, I think we do need to.
I guess, if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking for some of this for an event that's occurring in early October. And that was realistically, I mean, is that going to happen?
Well, and let me answer that quickly. I mean, it can't happen that quickly. I mean, there is a process that we have to go through to hire a consultant, and that takes months. I mean, just to be honest with you, it's not a week's kind of a process. We've got to go through formal advertisement. We've got to go through a committee and a short list and an interview and a contract, all which have to be brought back to this board. But the idea is that it's Mike is requesting these, and we want to facilitate if possible. But of course, it's at the direction of the board. And so, bringing again this as an informational item is just early action that could be taken, and we're prepared to do so if you're ready to proceed.
And I guess that was my question, Eric. I took this as an information item and not an action item.
Yes.
But are you looking for some kind of a motion?
No, not a motion
Okay.
today, but if I've got your confidence that, that you're comfortable with staff proceeding, we would bring back some information next month for your action, possibly presenting options for engaging the consulting process for one or more of these projects that might be included on this letter.
Are these types of things we're going to do as a full board, or is it more responsibilities of the subcommittee that should be doing these things?
You know, overall, the board's going to see everything that comes from the subcommittee level. So you will see everything. But at the subcommittee level, once we have those committees named, we would be taking items like this to subcommittee as well. So if a subcommittee happens to be formed at the time that this is occurring, we will automatically engage them at that point. And because that's a several-month process, it would be, I think it would be highly probable that we could have a subcommittee on by then. But again, I'm not familiar completely with the mayor's schedule, but there is a schedule to get them engaged in short order.
I'd like to make a comment that I'd really like to recommend that this subcommittee get formed.
Okay.
I think that this is one of the best branding pieces we have for our city, and I think it's important that we put it up there.
And if I may add to that discussion, possibly we could ask the mayor that as presentations are made to this board and things evolve and requests like this come forth so that actions are being met, that possibly the subcommittees could be formed in the order of succession so that priorities are moving along at a constant rate.
And let me pass those comments forward to him. I'll be happy to do so.
And Michael, I do have one question for you. Actually, it's two. On these first two events, when you say that they're inclusive, the monies you're asking for, of a test section, do you have companies that are ready to do a test during these events for you?
There are. Now, that was, to address that earlier point, that was what we were suggesting, if even possible. I don't think it is possible, would simply be a testing opportunity because we do have a big event in October. And as we were doing analysis early on with regard to these projects, there are certain companies that specialize in a couple of these different projects that we talk to. But certainly understand there's a process that you have to go through to select the ultimate group that would execute these projects. But there are people that we did talk to.
Thank you.
Eric, one other thing, I think the consensus of the board is that we would like for you to bring us back at the next meeting a recommendation about what we may do to move forward with the river. One of the things that I'd like to ask you to think about as well is, are there options to expedite it? I think we're all aware that this is a multi-year, decade kind of a process, and that we are wanting to be transparent. We want to do everything according to the appropriate processes. If there are items like this that can be expedited in some way, if there are any options there, I suppose we'd like to hear those as well, wouldn't we? If there are any options. Okay. Mike, thank you. Any other questions for Mike?
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now Eric's bringing us some great news, I hope. This is the next item on the agenda is about how we're doing on collecting the tax.
Well, what I wanted to bring to you today is we've completed formatting a report that we plan to bring back to you monthly. You'll find it attached as the MAPS 3 Revenue and Expenditure Report, and you'll see that our revenue to date, at least through July 31st, is $17.1 million. And so collections are proceeding on target, and we will be updating these. One of the comments that I think I'll make as a part of the report is realize that as we plan meetings and the way business and accounting work for us, there'll always be 1 month behind the actual date of the meeting. I mean, we actually need to close reports. There's some other activity that goes on as we summarize this information. But the other part of the report that I'll bring to your attention is we've created an expenditure summary that's by project. And with some of the approvals and some of the things that we're preparing to move forward on, consulting services and things, those will be figures that will start showing up in these projects as we engage consultants. And so on the transit perspective, the authorization to expend the MAPS 3 funds for the hub study, that will show up on a future report under the transit section of this. And you'll see further expenditures, and we'll track it by month, by fiscal year, and by total, as you see. So we're prepared to recommend that we follow this format as kind of a general principle for monthly reporting. It's something that we'll bring back, and of course we can answer any questions that come up at that time.
Eric, I have one question. You mentioned that collections are on target, but yet the target's not reflected here. Is that something maybe we could add as to what the expectations were on a month-by-month basis so we can see how we're tracking and if collections are staying online?
If I may, maybe we could allow opportunities for me to do verbal updates on that with the understanding that periodically targets are readjusted throughout the year. It's something that we do look at on a month-to-month basis. And so I could report this month that the sales tax collections are above our anticipated target. And I did not bring those percentages with me today, but I would be happy to do those verbally if we could, only because sometimes there are mid-year adjustments that are made and to avoid any confusion between maybe what an early target or an adjusted target might be for that particular year.
But Eric, there was some target that had to do with the number of years and months it was going to be collected.
Yeah, that's $777 million.
There was a big target set that...
And I would bring to you that is already being reconsidered. And once we are more comfortable with that new projection will be, I will just tell you the total projection of 777, taking in the current economic conditions, some of the new outlook, that number is changing. And as we get more comfortable with that new projection, that would be additional information I'd be happy to bring back to this advisory board.
Well, I certainly we understand, I guess, that projections are going to change because conditions are out of the control of the city. But I think one of our responsibilities is to balance these projects and make sure we spend the money and we don't overspend, and we know where we are and how it's tracking and what's available. So,
and we will be bringing that to you. And I just, as a summer report, we would choose to use this format as a part of a bigger program consulting arrangement that we're hoping to engage here in the next few months. As we do some budget verifications, I would say that it's two sides. There's a revenue projection that we can look at, but there's also the budgeting and expenditure side that we want to be also a little more comfortable with. Just like what was presented with the sports facilities, just because there was an anticipated amount to be collected, there's always adjustments that could be made to still reach those same goals for a lesser amount. And so that would be every goal that we have for the original MAPS, MAPS 2, and now MAPS 3. Whatever those collections are, we will make sure that we scope and budget projects accordingly to ensure that they're completed on time and on budget, just as Councilman McAtee mentioned as well. I'm available to answer any questions, of course, and I'd be happy to add any additional information. I'd like to do that verbally if I could, but
Eric, can you remind us, was it April 1 that we started collecting sales tax?
We did.
Yeah, April, May, June, those 3 months collectively, what we collected?
So this will be through the July 31st time frame for this reporting period. So obviously there is an August check that was received. It was above target. But it's not included in this report because we haven't closed the month of August yet, and that will be included on the next report.
No, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. We have, though, in the totals, April, May, and June dollars, and that's what I was asking.
This is 3 months worth of collections.
Yeah.
But we've already the 17 million.
I think that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
3 months.
All right. Other questions about the revenue or how we're presenting it? Everyone comfortable with that? Okay. Other comments by board members?
I want to make a comment.
Yes.
First of all, I really appreciate the presentations today. And the other thing is, just as a comment to our community and our patrons of the city, I know we're all really committed to MAPS 3. That's why we're here. And as we go through and we get the different information like from Councilman McAtee about the wellness centers and then about the river, I'm excited, Eric, and looking forward to having a consultant help to guide us soon so we can have some collective plan in place to stay committed to, because we all know we want to do everything, at least I do, and get it done now. So, we need that guidance, so help us with that.
Thank you.
You mentioned that the park subcommittee was going to be selected next week. Are there any other subcommittee selections that are coming up that we should be aware of that are scheduled?
That's the only one that I'm aware of that's on for Tuesday. But I do understand, again, that the mayor is forming other committees, and I believe there's a regular schedule. Again, I don't know if that's each council meeting in the next month or if it's every other, but there is a regular schedule that he's considering to get those appointed.
Because the convention was 2 weeks ago, right? And that's all we've done so far, all that has been done so far.
And council's only been meeting every other week through the summer months. They'll go on to a regular monthly, or excuse me, a weekly meeting schedule here in just a few more short weeks.
Any other comments? I wanted to mention to you that we, to make sure we all feel comfortable with this, we have Councilman McAtee who brings us the perspective of the council to each of our meetings and is a liaison and a line of communication, as well as Eric is attending the city council meetings as well. And so we're paying attention to making sure we communicate with the council and they communicate with us. There are some ideas floating about how we might have some interaction between this board and the council in the days ahead, and we'll talk more about that. But right now, that's the line of communication that we have, and it seems to be working as it has today. But if you have any comments about that, we'll let Eric or me know about it, and we'll want to make sure everybody's comfortable that we're making sure that connection is there.
In that regards, if you have anything that you'd like to pass back to the council, please voice it here or call me privately, and I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. Eric, any comments from staff?
We have nothing further.
And I want to open it up for any citizens who are here. Yes, Jeff?
I just want to thank you as a group for approving the intermodal hub study today. This is kind of a transcendental moment, and I just wanted to clarify for especially the citizenry as to what this means. We will be able to pursue federal funds, and this is one of the great opportunities and maps, not just for the citizens of Oklahoma City, but the surrounding communities. And this exemplifies how MAPS touches our surrounding sister cities. Through this intermodal hub, in the future, we may be able to have connectivity to Edmond, Norman, Midwest City, Yukon, all through this one particular location. So that is very heartening, and I can't express to you our gratitude for moving forward with that. I would also say that the alternatives analysis process is underway. In fact, we're about to have a meeting in a few minutes for the public citizens across the street. There's a working group that is working on recommendations as to streetcar routes, and it's my hope that once the citizens subcommittee of MAPS is assigned, our current trajectory shows that we should be able to start route assignments in February and March, which, with the convention center study being approved, or the consultant, that would tie into some of the earlier comments in terms of being comfortable with the route and where it might go. So it's important for the public to understand that MAPS, the streetcar and hub, is the nucleus of this larger dream, this larger plan, and your move today expedites that process. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you for being here. Anyone else? If there's no further business, we're adjourned.